Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new build in my series, Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. Today, I am very happily bringing you my build of what I believe that Hathorne House from Nancy Drew Midnight in Salem should have looked like. Now, needless to say, the Hathorne House that we got in the actual game in Midnight of Salem was a tremendous disappointment, just like most things in the game. I have already done renovations of the Perry House from Midnight in Salem and Luminous Infusions, but I also needed to do the Hathorne House because really it is the titular location of the game. It is extremely important to the game in terms of the history and Salem itself, so it desperately needed a makeover, and I really wanted to do it justice. I really wanted to do my research and make this a house that I would actually want to see in the game and explore in the game. I wanted it to feel real, and I wanted it to have so many clues and be a really cool, fun location, something that I think actually should have been included in the game. I am basing my rendition of the build off of the rendition that we got in the trailer, the original trailer that we received at the end of Sea of Darkness. So when Sea of Darkness released, it released with a trailer for Midnight in Salem at the very end. And that trailer looked amazing. That trailer had so many cool elements to it, and it showed us the historic Hathorne House. So it looked like there was a camera kind of zooming up. There was a sign in front of the house that said Hathorne House. And then there was this really spooky voiceover with Deirdre saying that she needed help and that people were accusing someone in her family of being a witch. And then there was this like cool fire going on the inside, and then this like handprint thing. It was just so cool, and that house actually looked pretty awesome and looked like there would be so many cool things to explore. So we only see the outside of the house, and then we only see kind of a brief glance of the inside of the house in that trailer itself. But I was able to build an entire house just off of that little snippet. So the outside of the house is essentially exactly the same shape as the trailer. That's exactly what I was going for. And then the inside of the house I designed in a colonial restoration style. So Judge John Hathorne, the man who lived in Hathorne House, lived there in the late 1600s. So his house was lived in about 1692. That was when we would imagine that the goings-on of Salem were happening, and Hathorne was inhabiting this house. However, you would imagine that after those years, other family members of his would continue to live in the house, children, grandchildren, other people might move in, and so it would be a while before the house itself would necessarily become a historical monument per se. So I decided that the inside would more closely resemble kind of an architecture style that harkens back to colonial era interior design and decoration, but is more in the colonial restoration style, which also took a lot of elements from Victorian design. And basically what I gleaned from my research is that this kind of design style is primarily made up of pastel colors and lots of white woodwork. So there's a lot of white elements, lots of white crown molding. The stairs are white, the doors are white. The outside windows, of course, are original, so those are kind of dark brown and the wooden colors. And the layout of the house is more of that almost Victorian kind of layout, that kind of fancier layout with rooms blocked off and the entertainment rooms being kind of the main spaces on the bottom floor. I had a lot of fun doing it in the colonial restoration style. I kind of imagined that would be about the time that this house would have been taken over by the people of Salem, by the government of Salem or the historical society or whoever is running the house. And then at that time, they would have restored it. It would have taken a few years really to restore it and get it into functioning order, and then it would be turned into a museum. And I really like that idea. I think the museum that we got in Midnight in Salem was also a tremendous disappointment. So I decided to kind of mesh the Hathorne House and the museum and get elements from both. I think what would have been more ideal is if there was a historical society that we visited in the game, akin to the museum that we had in the game, but like actually a museum, you know, where you like actually learn things and can interact with exhibits and see things and look at things. An actual museum would have been nice. But then in addition to the historical society, you could go around and visit locations that go along with the historical society. This is actually quite common on the East Coast for a lot of places that have a lot of history. There's kind of a main building, a historical society, and then you can go visit recreations and remodels of houses that people used to live in, or train stations, or farms, and they have people in like period costume. They have tour guides that take you through and let you know what life was like during that time. That's exactly what I imagined this house to be. So there would be tour guides that would be able to take people through these places. The rooms would be decorated with furniture and kind of set up and staged in a way to make it look more like people are living here in a certain period of time. And again, it's anywhere between the 1600s to the 1800s, closer to that colonial restoration style and not exactly colonial architecture and interior design. I also thought that Tegan would live here, Tegan would work here. So there's an office on the bottom level that I also imagined would have been Judge Hathorne's original office. And I like the idea of Tegan working there a lot more. So she's kind of the manager of this particular building. And she does research for the building and kind of puts together tours and puts together informational materials for the people to visit. I like that idea a lot more than her standing at the random desk in the museum doing who knows what, watching Nancy make pumpkins for some reason. Like, that's not interesting. I want her to actually have a purpose and a point. While I'm doing the voiceover for this video, I would just like you all to know that Mel is literally getting into everything. She is eating paper, she is chewing on boxes, she is trying to steal my Post-it notes. Yeah, you are. Now she's like sneaking away like, I would never. I'm the queen. That's not queenly behavior. Okay, good. We've encouraged the queen to stop her mischief. Thank you, queen. Anyway, back to the build, back to the important stuff. On the outside of the build, I just did some simple landscaping in the front. I decided to not really landscape the back all that much because Nancy wouldn't really go back there necessarily. She would kind of enter in through the front of the yard, and then she would be able to explore the entirety of the house. And I wanted the front of the house to look nice. And again, the game is supposed to take place right around Halloween time, and I feel like we just did not get enough Halloween decorations in a lot of these places. I mean, you can make your own pumpkins, but if you decide not to make the pumpkins, there's basically no Halloween decorations. I want them everywhere. So after I finish doing the landscaping, I add a few fall decorations outside. I add some jack-o'-lanterns. I add that big, beautiful sign that in Simlish, we're going to pretend, says the historic Hathorne House out in the front. And then I get a sim to add some orange lights on the fence as well. So they would decorate the Hathorne House according to the season. Right now, as I'm building it, it's summer, but when we pop back in to do the furnishing, it will be autumn colors, so then we can see the beautiful autumnal trees and all of those great colors. So yeah, I was really happy with how all of that turned out. It was surprisingly difficult when I was doing research to find information on Judge Hathorne himself. So what I was able to find from my research, and a lot of my information I got from the SalemWitchMuseum.com, and it's literally just SalemWitchMuseum.com, I found that they know where Hathorne's house used to be, that like there actually was a site for it, and there no longer is a house there that he would have inhabited. It looks like it's probably now taken over by a modern building. But at the site of the house, it has a little bit of information about who John Hathorne was, and he was just an awful dude. And I feel like this is not emphasized nearly enough in Midnight in Salem. Again, I want more education. So coming to this house would really teach us a lot about Hathorne. Like maybe we could actually learn all of his questioning. He questioned Tituba, who is one of the witches that we learn about in the game. He presumed guilt. He took a lead in questioning. He backed accusers. He believed in something called a touch test, where you could just like touch somebody and tell that they were a witch. Like, how awful is that? And he was a crucial figure in executing 20 innocent individuals, and he was so awful that he sent 4-year-old Dorothy Good to jail. Just like awful person, horrible person. And there's notes about like interviews that he had with people that he was trying to accuse of witchcraft. He was especially interested in capturing and convicting George Burroughs, who was apparently the king of witches in his mind. Just the way that he went after these people with so much vitriol is just insane. So I think it's super interesting learning about him, and I would have actually loved to learn all of this stuff in the game. Unfortunately, this game teaches us nothing. But if this house was his, then I would love to have little rooms that have all of his stuff, and then have signs in each of the rooms kind of talking about, this is the living room where Judge Hathorne, based on journals, was rumored to meet with so-and-so to plan their questioning of Tituba, and then explain like how they were going to go about that, and like actually teach us what these witch trials were like. That would have been cool. That would be the whole point of this build in the game. That's what I designed its purpose to be. But anyway, let's talk about the actual design now that we're doing some furnishing. So on the inside of the build here, this is the living room area. And again, I decorated it more as like a staged room. So this is, the whole house is technically functional once you take away the velvet ropes that are dividing off the rooms. But it's more just to show like a scene, like a theater scene of what life would have looked like back then. So I decorated it just with some fun elements, lots of light sconces, candles, a fancy fireplace, decorative items and books and stuff like that. And I loved the idea of having the velvet ropes right inside the door. This is something that I've experienced when I've gone to visit historical sites. Like you can walk partially into the room, and then you can kind of just look around at the scene itself while the tour guide tells you about things, and you can look at all of the beautiful artifacts. Like, I don't think these couches necessarily would have belonged to Judge Hathorne, but they would have been maybe a reproduction of pictures that had been seen from inside the house, or, I mean, not that pictures existed back then, but you know what I mean, like paintings, portraits, or later on when the house was inhabited, maybe pictures of what it might have looked like then, and just recreations of all of that history. I think that would have been very cool. So this is a recreation of the dining room space, and it's just very formal. Again, we're going with that colonial restoration style. So we have the whitewood paneling, we have pastel colors and wallpapers, pastel fabrics on the chairs, the couches, all of that sort of stuff. Lots of very fancy decoration. Cabinets with like beautiful porcelain dishes and stuff like that. And I imagine that Nancy would, during the day, she could come to the Hathorne house. She could talk to Tegan. Maybe she could take a tour around the house and like actually get information from a tour guide. And she could walk around herself, do a self-guided tour, and read all of the information on the little plaques that are in each room. You'll see me place those eventually as well. So like during the day, she has to follow the rules, right? She can't sneak into any of these places. But then at night, Nancy can like sneak her way back here. So maybe when she's staying at the Perry house, she would steal a key from Tegan, like she would find a way to get a key from Tegan's room or something like that, and then she would be able to unlock the Hathorne house at night. And then she would be able to come in here, she would be able to move the velvet ropes and then go into the dining room space, go into the living room space, and maybe there would be clues in there. Like maybe there would be things hidden in a crack in the wall, or maybe in the living room there's a bookcase, or in the dining room on one of the plates, if she were to turn over the plate, she would see the initials of somebody that she needed to find. Like maybe one of the accused witches, maybe their initials are like on all of the porcelain dishes, the fancy china in the dining room. So it's like, oh my gosh, he stole their fancy dishware. He stole all of their most important possessions. And it would just become more and more clear that Judge Hathorne did what he did out of greed and not out of actually thinking that these primarily women but also men were witches, and then it was more motivated by stealing things and stealing their possessions, stealing their land and whatnot, all of that good stuff. So I think it would be really cool for Nancy to find things out that way, and somehow all of that historical information would relate very clearly to a modern day plot going on. Honestly, the modern day plot of the arson that we have in Midnight in Salem is just not it. It's horrible. When we eventually find out who committed the arson and why, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So honestly, I feel like we don't need to have that plot point in our version of Midnight in Salem, where we're creating what we believe that the builds could look like. We could still do that. And if that were the case, then parts of this build actually would have burnt rooms. Based on the floor plan that I have, it would actually be the bathroom that would be burnt, which would be kind of funny, for the one space to be burnt to be the room with the most water. Probably not what would have happened. It probably would be one of the other spaces. Or maybe it's another building in the Historical Society that burnt down, or maybe there was like a shed in the back of Hathorne House that burnt down, or maybe this is just what it looked like before it burnt. And then this is what it would have looked like when Nancy could explore it unscathed, or something like that. So either way, I'm very happy with how this recreation turned out. I think it would fit into the story a lot better and give Nancy just so many more opportunities to find something interesting. Like, I loved the idea of having this glass model of the island, or just the town of Salem. In The Sims 4, it has to be an island, but if there was just a model of the town of Salem sitting down on this lower level, Nancy could look at all of the historical buildings. It would be such a cool way for detectives to get acquainted with the whole town itself and the layout of everything. I think that would have been very cool. This room here I designed to be Judge Hathorne's professional office, so his official library and office. This is where it would have been. It has since been refurbished in the colonial restoration style, and I put this fancy little map on the wall here because if you were to click a particular location on that map, a very specific spot, then you could open up a secret panel in that wall and climb up the ladder, because we need a cool secret passageway and hidden location in the Hathorne House. We need that. It would have been so cool. The Hathorne House, again, in the game, what we get is a house with two spaces that you can essentially look at. You can look at the whole bottom floor, which is one room that's completely burnt, and you can find one thing in it. A bedroom that you can't explore and has a bunch of medical equipment, because the story in that is that the older woman who lived there, the last living descendant of Judge John Hathorne, had been living there up until her death, so there was a lot of medical equipment in the room, but there was very little, if anything, you could look at in that space. And then you can go up the stairs and look at nothing. It's burnt out upstairs as well. So we have this very cool historical location that we could have explored, and there's absolutely nothing in it. It's just very disappointing. So I've probably said that so many times. This video is probably terribly repetitive. I'm so sorry. Just the same thoughts keep revolving around and around in my head. It's just like, it's too much. It's boring, it's plain, there's no educational value whatsoever. So I probably sound like a broken record. I'm sorry for that, but I have very strong feelings about the disappointment that I have for Midnight in Salem and how much better I wanted it to be. So let's just focus on that, shall we? We'll move forward. I'm working on the bathrooms now. I decided to make the hall bathroom a public bathroom so that guests who would visit the Hathorne House would have a bathroom to use. I imagined that this house probably would not have had 2 bathrooms or indoor plumbing like in the 1600s. I don't think that was a thing yet, but as the house was remodeled by later occupants, they probably would have added indoor plumbing, and it maybe would have just been like these 2 bathrooms perhaps would have been a bedroom space initially, and then in the 1800s or so it was broken up into 2 rooms, and then they were both made into bathrooms. That was kind of the idea I had there. We gotta make a functional house. It is important. And then the bedrooms, I decided to decorate kind of one that would be more of a feminine style and one that would be more of a masculine style with the colonial restoration theme within both. I really like the color schemes of both rooms. I really like how they turned out. They are not cluttered at all. They are very decorated, very highly stylized, but this is kind of what it would be like if you were doing a mansion tour or a house tour. You would get to see the bedrooms as they would have been designed by the occupants themselves. So I decided this one was just kind of very fancy. We have really nice bedroom equipment. We have this nice chaise lounge where the ladies could sit and get their corsets and their stays done up, stuff like that. Beautiful beds and colors and fabrics. For the kids' room, they've got just like the 2 beds and a bunch of toys, a big wardrobe, just kind of the necessities. It would be like this is their space. And it was really hard to figure out actually how many kids John Hathorne had. I could not find it anywhere. He did have children because we know that Nathaniel Hawthorne was a descendant of his, so we know that he had to have kids because Nathaniel Hawthorne had to come from somewhere. But I couldn't find any references to how many he had specifically, so I was like, okay, maybe he had 1 daughter and 2 boys. So this is the room for the 2 boys with all of their toys. I imagined that they were younger and then his daughter was the oldest child. And I decorated the rooms accordingly. I had fun kind of picking out toys that would have been on display as like, these were toys that children played with during the Victorian age or during the 1700s or during the 1600s or something. That's part of the trick with this build in particular, was melding a bunch of different eras all into one in a way. It was kind of fun, kind of a fun challenge. It's just vaguely historical. We'll just go with that. We don't have a specific era we're going for, but it's vaguely historical. So then this bedroom would have been for John Hathorne and his wife. So it's just kind of the bigger bedroom. It has this nice pastel yellow theme with lighter woods, and then I block off a little corner as kind of like a getting ready station, and I actually put mannequins in this room as well to show some possible fashions of the era, which I really like that idea. I really wish we could have seen that in the game or something. We have this one creepy mannequin in the museum that's just kind of like bland and scary looking. Doesn't look very interesting, but I like that idea at least. So I put 3 mannequins in here, and then I dressed them in historical dress. So Nancy could come up here and she could look at the different period costumes. They're not costumes, the different wear, the different dresses and suits and pants and whatnot that all of these people would have worn. I can't think of a word other than costumes. This is what happens when you have to do voiceovers, and you just can't think of a word. You just get to talk around the word in a fun little tornado until you either think of it or just move on. So we're just going to move on. This room is pretty much decorated, so we're very soon going to move on to my favorite room in the house, which is John Hathorne's secret office, his secret attic. So I mentioned down in his official office space, the library space, that if you were to click on the map in just the right way, you could find this ladder, Nancy could find this ladder, and then climb all the way up to this attic space, which Judge Hathorne would have had as a secret space that nobody in the museum knows about. I love the idea that this space would have been untouched from when John Hathorne lived here. So when he died was the last time that somebody was up here, because nobody else knew about this space. He kept it very secret, very hidden, and this is where he did a lot of his research and planning on the witch trials. So I left books everywhere, and Nancy could read these books. I left this journal here, like he had just finished writing things down in this journal and set it down on the basket. And then he went downstairs before he passed away. There are paintings up here, so maybe he liked to paint or something like that. There's a candle making station. And then, so you can just imagine Nancy coming up here and going over to this desk and finding historical documents that nobody has seen before, that reveals new information about John Hathorne, about his role in the witch trials, about things that he probably stole from the people that he convicted and then hid or kept as like treasures, and maybe that's the whole reason for the mystery. We could talk for days about different plot ideas for the whole Midnight in Salem, but that's one that I have and one that I enjoy a lot more. And frankly, I just enjoy the idea of having more places to explore, more things to look at, and more things to find. And I hope you agree with me, so I hope that you enjoyed this build. Please let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. Do you like it? Do you think it's better than the original in the game? Would you prefer to see this one instead or something like it? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon.